Last week, the clock stopped for two extraordinary Americans. One, a former war hero and senator, John McCain. The other, the Queen of Soul. Both lay in state for days and days. McCain's was a sombre affair suited to the capital of the world. Aretha Franklin's was colourful and glamorous, the star wearing a red dress and 5-inch stilettos in an open casket in Motown. Some have carped about the excessive remembrancing, given the funeral seemed to go on for longer than the Jurassic period. OK, I exaggerate. Franklin's live-streamed send-off was a snappy 8 hours. Not I. I say R-E-S-P-E-C-T, respect. It is only right and fitting that we take time out together to mark the passing of those who are truly great, or tragedy, 1-minute silences at football matches. On Remembrance Day, the way the Notting Hill Carnival stopped to recall the Grenfell fire, the funerals of great Americans, these pauses in everyday life remind us we are united by our mortality. These are uncertain and angry times. Such moments of international communion help bind us together.
I want you to do that respect thing again before we go on. Okay. I sort of agree with you, but I think something happened in this country that I think took it, that kind of grieving, that kind of worshipping over the top, and we know what I'm talking about, is the death of Princess Diana. Yes, it kind of spawned armies of grief junkies, you know, people weeping and wailing and crying. You know, I think absolutely John McCain absolutely afforded respect. You know, the guy, you know, I wouldn't be weeping and wailing over his death, but I mourn the loss of such a man. I'm sad about that, and Aretha Franklin. But I do think it's interesting what's happened to this country. We have become... You know, there's a think tank called Civitas, and this guy called Patrick West wrote a report in 2012. And he was saying, he called this stuff ostentatious caring. He called it grief light. And he said, he said, this has been triggered by the decline of institutions that gave people's lives meaning. Institutions like family, like the church, like neighbourhood. And when you think, and the result of that has been that, you know, we don't do things that we would have done 20 years ago naturally. For instance, you know, people now, you know, 20 years ago, you'd knock on your elderly neighbour's door and say, do you need anything at the supermarket? Everybody, as a matter of course...
I do it for Greg all the time. He's always popping round.
And he always gets the wrong stuff.
would stand up on a train for a pregnant woman or for an elderly person. They don't do that now so much.
Should we make a distinction between the ostentatious public grieving for people we don't know
let me just finish the point on that. And because I think we've lost our instinct to care as a society, what happens is when something big, like a death, like it's overkill. And, you know, it's almost like we want to reconnect it. It's like a lonely society that's trying to reconnect with something.
Well, I think that's why it's so important, as I said.
Yeah,
Greg, I'll bring you in. You used to run the FA. Do you not think, and of course it is, obviously you want to show respect, but there are too many minute silences in football matches, and they've somewhat lost their... And I don't mean this in a derogatory fashion, but, you know, the second assistant groundsman sadly dies, so the whole team must stop.
I do think you do get... if you support a particular side, and people that have played and you've watched and you've been part of it, and they've been your heroes, I think it's perfectly valid to
you don't think they've been overdone?
Respect.
Well, I think it's good to show you respect. I think, and this tweet's probably a little bit overboard, but I'm going to read you anyway. So many people are crying or in bits over Bowie. F you. You are not 10. You're an adult. Man the up, say something interesting. Now, that's a bit excessive. However, a bit excessive. Even over the top for Big Phil, right? But listen, OK, stiff upper lip is a thing, you know, we like to be proud, and I've stood by many a graveside, unfortunately, you know, in my time in the military, OK? Respect needs to be shown. It's this thing where people just seem to carry it on and on and on, you know what I mean? You've got to grieve in your own space and show your respect in public. You know
the arm is selling itself now, by the way, on It's OK to Cry.
It's OK to say, and I do say it's OK. It's OK. I have a little group called It's OK to Say, and I'm encouraging guys to come forward.
OK to say or OK to cry?
To say. when they've got problems and all that sort of stuff. It's okay to do.
Yeah, okay.
I don't have a drama with that. Do you know what I mean?
No, okay.
But when you've got this mass going on all the time, I just think that's a bit much.
It is kind of self-indulgent, a bit gratuitous, isn't it? You know, where you look on Twitter and various social medias.
People are in bits.
And there's people every week saying, I'm devastated. The same people saying, I'm devastated
They've never
again.
met the person
and
involved.
never met the person.
And
I feel your pain. No, you don't feel the pain. It's rubbish. No. But, you know, the Diana grieving, I mean, let's have a look at a clip here. This is Dickie Arbiter, who used to work for the Royals. Listen what he has to say.
I suppose an outpouring was expected. That it was so big amazed everybody. And I remember the first bunch of flowers was laid at the centre gate of Buckingham Palace at about 5 to 5 in the morning.
The sight of these crowds going on the streets, I found it compelling. And people mock it now, thinking some kind of madness overcame us. There was a collective psychotic episode where the country went hysterical in those few days. I have to tell you, at the time, it didn't feel like that. It felt like something much more admirable, actually. It was a very gentle, almost tender atmosphere.
He says that, but and I covered that story, obviously it was 21 years ago, and my experience, I had written a column 2 days before she died, and I criticised her for being involved in politics. Royals then wasn't as they are now. And the paper, when she died, forgot to pull the column. And
what happened?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. These
got a lot of support,
these grieving people, you know, I got so many death threats that I had to have a bodyguard, security guard for 3 months.
No.
I wasn't allowed to work. I would have had you.
I'm not taking it. I'm telling you.
And you know, I had to park under the building. I wasn't allowed to walk in there because people wanted to kill me. I mean, they didn't understand.
Well, nothing's changed there, really, when you think.
I didn't know you in those days.
I'm not important enough to have a bodyguard now.
Can we make a distinction between... I think everyone was surprised by that, how with the Dianification, do you remember, of our own emotions?
But it became competitive mourning, didn't
Yes,
it? So
it
that
did,
when that
you're right.
terrible day, when you saw the hearse driving up the M1, people throwing roses...
I remember my own father actually walked past, and he was stood on a bridge and he watched the cortege going out, and my stepmother didn't have the same feelings and kind of found his crying rather weird.
It was a watershed. Rachel,
yes.
May it long be a long way away, but as and when we lose the Queen, will there be the same level of outpouring, or was it driven because Diana was so young, a life taken so young?
I think, of course. I mean, when the Queen dies, she's in her 90s.
No.
And
I don't think it will be.
I think there will be a convulsion again, but I think the planned succession, as we know, the bridge operation is you know, it's going to be clockwork. I think it's going to be very well managed. It's going to be incredibly moving.
So it was the youth. It was the youthfulness.
I think it'll be a quieter morning, and I think a lot of people's grief over Diana.
But it will go on for a week,
and I
by
say,
the way.
I say this respectfully, was more about them than her, because I think people identified with her sadnesses. I think they identified with the fact she was a young mum. They identified with the traumas
the
that she
story
went through
was
in
so
life.
sad. I mean, she was an incredible woman.
So in a way,
She was
their
only 37, yes.
their grief was more about them than about her, because they didn't know her.
Can I get back to the point of the queue, which was, I think that we all have these hectic lives, me increasingly less so, obviously.
Yes, I noticed that.
But what
You'll be
I
selling
think...
the big issue at Paddington, I understand, and I will buy one.
I'll buy one too.
Weddings and bar mitzvahs. What I think these moments serve as, we don't go to church, as Carol said so much. We don't have time to see our families. We're all scattered.
Yeah.
These are moments when it's where the human family gathers, and and we take time out. We don't look at Twitter.
It's a bit ersatz, isn't it?
What do you mean ersatz?
It's spare. It's not real. I'm not related to Rita Franklin or Senator
No,
McCain.
but we can all stop and think, what did she do? What was her legacy? What is our legacy? As you sort of have this strange
social
duality.
media's amplifying a lot of this stuff nowadays.
Of course it is, yes. I mean, well, the fact that her funeral was live-streamed. Who hasn't had that? Do you like these moments where we all stop? Remembrance Sunday. I think they're incredibly important.
I'm a massive supporter of
Remembrance Sunday.
But absolutely.
Sure. Well, it's the same. It's remembering all those who died.
That's what I was trying to say. I fear if you do it too often, they lose their impact.
But it's interesting, isn't it? If you look at the funerals you go to, and you know, I'm of an age where I tend
I'm afraid we can't look at the funerals we go to because we've got to move on. Sorry, Greg, again. Sorry, we can't.
It's quite brutal. No, it was. That was sharp.
Gotta say it. Now, we're all used to Donald Trump saying it how it is, or at least how he sees it. But this week, it's not the president who's hitting the headlines because of comments he's made, but an anonymous White House senior aide. A sensational account of life in the most powerful administration in the world has been published by the New York Times, and it doesn't make for reassuring reading. Senior officials will privately admit their daily disbelief at the Commander-in-Chief's comments and actions, the aide writes. Most are working to insulate their operations from his whims. Meetings with him veer off topic and off the rails. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. Sounds like an episode of The Pledge. For your candid revelations, whoever you are most certainly our straight talker of the week.
Yeah, but he hasn't actually told us something we didn't know, has he?
No,
I thought you were going to talk about the Bob Woodward book as well, because that's going to be very damaging to him.
I'd rather hear about Greg's funerals that he attends, to be honest.
Yeah, should we go back to that?
No, I've forgotten it now.
I'd have more respect for this so-called straight talker who actually knew who he or she was.
Yeah, why wasn't he being a bit straight dealer?
I'd like to see him. Maybe we'll find out. They'll get wind of this and they'll be rumbled.
It's like in your game, Army, top brass. They always say how perilous it is, how they have no money. Once they've retired, all the time they're actually in post, everything's fantastic, we'll make it work. The minute they step out and take the pension, then, of course, the Army hasn't got enough money to put soldiers on the streets.